I'd like to introduce Debbie Lynn Toomey. She is from Tufts Hospital, and she is going to be leading today's discussion. Debbie, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Carrie, and thank you to Quincy Public Library for allowing me to continue to do my outreach work as Tufts Medical Center's Injury Prevention Coordinator. A lot of my work focuses on falls prevention and also helping the aging population live quality, healthy, and of course, safe lives. And today I want to introduce to you and welcome State Senator John Keenan, who I've known for many years and has been a really good proponent to the people that he serves in the districts that he serves, which is Norfolk County and also Plymouth County. So Senator Keenan, welcome.
Thanks, great to be here. Nice to see you. Hope all is well.
All is well, all is well. And I want to thank all of you who are joining and also watching the recording of this for listening in. So let's get started. I want to, first of all, let me ask you, how did you get into politics?
Very young. First campaign I got involved in was a woman named Joyce Baker, who was running for state representative. She lived a block up from my house. And that was in elementary school, so a lot of us would just get together and they promised us free donuts if we delivered literature, campaign literature, door to door. So I did that, and but then it was really through school, and I kind of came of age in the 1970s. And I remember in 1975, my fifth grade class, it was a year before the bicentennial, and so we did a lot of work relative, about American history, and I was just fascinated by it. And I had a teacher, Miss Casey, who had us put on a production of the musical 1776. She took us to all the sites in Boston and Lexington and Concord, and I really just kind of fell in love with government at that point. And then as I went through high school, I got involved in the student council and was at that point going to city council meetings just because I happened to find them interesting. And so it was just something that I got into or became fascinated with in my elementary school years in terms of government and American history. And then as I went through high school, being involved there led me to being involved in city government and being involved in my campaigns as well throughout.
Wow. So you've been in the politics for many years. Now, as far as what you have achieved in being in politics, what are some of the most memorable and successes that comes to mind?
At the local level, the successes were just being able to help people. And everything we did on the city council, when I served in the city council for about 9 years, was just so local focused. And so you could do something in a budget that you knew would have a pretty quick impact. And so I found that to be very enjoyable and very rewarding. Just the fact that you could vote on something and then you could see it in play a few weeks or a month later, whatever the case may have been. At the state level, there's been a couple of things. One, my first term in the legislature, I was appointed as the Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on Mental Health and Substance Use. And it was an area that I didn't know an awful lot about, a subject matter that I didn't know an awful lot about. And we were able to, in that first term, in cooperating in partnership really with Representative Liz Malia, who was the House Chair of the committee, pass some landmark legislation. And knowing that what we did through that committee, that we managed to get passed through the House and the Senate to the governor's desk and signed, was going to impact positively on people's lives was very rewarding. And then I guess the second thing, and it might even be the most rewarding of all, has been my interaction with young people. For example, at the Holbrook Middle High School, they have a civics club, and we've really established a great relationship, and in fact, a working relationship. We have passed two pieces of legislation that have been where they have been involved. One was declaring World Peace Day here in Massachusetts, but secondly, I partnered with them to pass the first in the nation, first statewide ban on flavored tobacco products. No other state has done it. Other communities have done it. No other state has done it. The federal government is now following our lead. Other states are following our lead. But the students of Holbrook were really so involved at the very first stages. They brought it to my attention. And what was bothering them was they felt they were the next generation being targeted by big tobacco through vaping products. And so we partnered with them and got that legislation passed They were featured literally across the world in news stories and across the country. And so seeing that, being part of that partnership and watching these young children, these students just grow over the course of the year and a half when we were pushing this legislation, that was just so incredibly rewarding. And and the legislation is looking to be quite successful. Everything is trending in the right way in terms of youth use of tobacco products and vaping products here in Massachusetts. So hopefully it'll have a significant long-term impact.
Wow, that's wonderful. I mean, as a parent, I have teenage young men who, I appreciate all the work that you're doing in as far as, substance abuse and vaping, and really great work. Now, I know that you've also done work for the other end of the spectrum, for the older adults. Can you share with us some of the, what's your work right now as far as supporting the older adults, and also how you feel that's changed because of COVID?
I think that the most important work that we do in that respect is making sure that we have funding in place for the various programs that are offered at the local level. Through our senior centers, for instance, our councils on aging, there's just such a wide range of programming that's offered for seniors. And we realized during COVID, although we always recognized it, it really hit home during COVID how important that programming is, that people can get out of their homes, that they can go to a place where they can engage socially and physically. It's so critically important. And COVID really, really highlighted that. So we continue to fund our councils on aging, our senior centers as best we can. We also try to fund different programs, for instance, for falls prevention, all those types of things as best we can. And the other one the two other ones that are obviously very important is making sure that seniors have ready access to appropriate behavioral and medical care. That's very important. And then also that they have the ability to find housing that is best suited to their needs. And we've got a lot of work to do in that area. I'm now Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on Housing, and we're taking a look at senior housing. There hasn't been a whole lot built throughout the Commonwealth for quite some time. And so we're focusing on that as well.
Yeah. As far as senior housing goes, I'm reading a lot more that people are definitely requiring, they're needing it, but also a lot of older population, they are choosing to age at home. Are there any type of fundings that you could think of or are in the works that can help support those type of seniors who are choosing to just stay home because, that old mentality, I don't want to go to the nursing home. How can the state help with that?
One of the problems that we're having right now in that area is having a rate that allows for the care providers to make a living. People who care for our seniors in their homes, it's very difficult for them to make a good living at it. Talking with some people who run those types of services, they found themselves, and we were talking about when we did raise the minimum wage ultimately, but when we were talking about it, they said, it's just such a bad predicament. Here we are worried about raising the minimum wage to $15 because it will have an impact on our employees, our ability to hire employees who provide care for seniors. And so when you put it in that context, that $15 was going to impact the Commonwealth's ability, $15 per hour wage was going to impact the Commonwealth's ability to provide care to seniors. Things just obviously aren't working when you're dealing with that. So we are looking, and we have been funding the rates at a higher level. COVID, again, has illustrated or highlighted the need for that. In order for somebody to age in place, they oftentimes need people to come in to assist them with various things. Sometimes it's minor things, maybe helping around the house, moving things. And in other cases, it's some pretty intensive care. And so we have to make sure that we have those services available for every need. And it comes down to a question of funding. And then we're faced with, because of the rates and the wages, but also because of the economy in general right now, we are faced with a pretty significant shortage of people who are willing to do that type of work. And so we've got to kind of replenish that system and make sure that those people are available to care for our seniors.
It's really it's a hard cycle because you need every piece, every person in the cogwheel to make this happen. And not only the support systems, the caregivers, not only the people who can help transform their homes into something that's very livable, and the family members. I'm in the sandwich generation. I have my kids, and I also have, luckily my two parents, and creating a support system that's going to allow them to age in place independently without, it's this beautiful dance of, okay, I don't want to do too much for them because I don't want to enable them, but I want to make sure I'm there to catch them in case they need me. So it's that dance, right? So being a child of aging parents, you need that family support, but also there's the social connection piece that's very important as well. So there's so many different systems that needs to be in place in order to help the aging population thrive safely, happily at home, right? Yes. So, and because of COVID, it really, I guess that's one of the benefits of COVID. It really highlighted all those important systems that needs to be in place in order to help somebody age in a good quality of life, right? Yes. So, I guess, I don't know if I had a question there, but that was more of a statement.
No, and I agree.
Don't get me on.
my wife, her parents passed away within the last few years. And so there was, that was a big part of our lives for quite some, particularly my wife's life. It was going over to check on them, making sure that she had the care lined up, who was coming in on what day, and who was going to be doing different things and shopping and all of those things. And my sisters now, primarily my sisters are doing that with my mother, who fortunately is in good enough health that she can live on her own. But there's so much involved in it. And we have to just make sure that there is assistance not only for our parents, but for, the siblings who are providing that care. There have been efforts to allow for training and kind of a certification and then compensation for family members so that they can provide that care and be compensated for it. I think those are the types of things that we should be doing. We're looking at providing, housing through accessory dwelling units, meaning the ability to kind of do additional space in the home, either adding on or expanding a footprint or allowing for a different type of unit within a structure for parents, people who may need care. So there's a lot of things that we can do. And it's just, we just have to keep moving forward with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it must be difficult to figure out where to start, right?
It is. There's so many needs, unfortunately. And again, COVID has highlighted so many of those needs. And you touched on it again, the isolation, I think, was devastating for a lot of seniors. And they found themselves more homebound than usual, not able to get out. And we could see it in calls to our office for assistance. You could just get that sense of that there was just such a great need out there, and so much of it was just tied to isolation. And when you're isolated, your health suffers. There's a pretty distinct correlation between those two things, and so you see it on the other end as well with admissions to hospitals and the need for medical care.
Yeah, definitely. And people can feel lonely even when they are around other people. So it's not just being by themselves, right? So, and as you said, it just creates this, it's a negative ripple effect where they feel isolated. Then, our mental chatter starts becoming more of a reality than not. And then, it just impacts their health and just the way they're coping. So it's really it's something that we need to kind of keep working on, even after COVID. As far as social connections, the main one being what we're doing that right now is the Zoom. I have found that through my work as injury prevention, that's one of the barriers is technology literacy. for the aging population. Is there any type of funding or any education that's being put forth, not just in the community centers, because community centers are great, and I certainly have done lots of programs there where sometimes there's a waiting list because these are very motivated people who get themselves to the senior centers. But there's also the more high risk people, I believe, who just don't feel like they're community center type people, or they're private and they're proud, maybe. What type of assistance can we offer, do you think, for those type of individuals?
That's a really good point. And I'm not sure that beyond kind of assistance in the home with tasks and with hygiene and feeding and so forth. It's a very interesting point. I'm not sure that the Commonwealth is really doing anything in terms of that social connection for people who might not be able to get to a senior center but can live on their own, and as you say, might be a very private individual. My mother, she probably doesn't want to, if I'm on television, she's probably like, why'd you say that? But my mother's a very private person. She's a very private person. So we got her an iPad, and she'd never really been involved with technology. Raising 7 children, there was no technology at the time. It was go out and play, and so a few years ago, it might be 3 years ago now, we got her an iPad and set her up on the iPad, and so she can kind of look around on the internet. But what she uses most is Facebook, and we hear so many cons about Facebook. But one of the pros is that my mother, is able to look and see what her grandchildren and her great grandchildren are doing. She can see pictures. She has been able to connect with her nieces and nephews and their children, as well as their children, where she wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So that connection through Facebook has really kept her in touch and with everything that's going on with all her relatives. And it's been really, really invaluable. But I don't think we have a program in the state where we would make that technology available to seniors. We just went through it, making sure that students during COVID had access to computers and the internet, but we haven't done anything for seniors. So that's a really interesting point. It's something that we should be doing.
I think it would be a great investment because, as you mentioned, it's a very interesting way to build that social connections through Facebook or YouTube. And, we had to educate the students on how to be technology savvy with Chrome or, whatever computer systems their school system chooses to use. I mean, other parts of the life spectrum, the aging population certainly do need it. And maybe there could be a way to kind of validate that that's a great investment in their overall health and may decrease healthcare costs.
It's a great idea. I just put it in writing, actually, right on my list.
Oh, great. And it's recorded. Great idea from me.
Yes.
Awesome. Actually, you talked about your parents. I talked about my parents too, because, that's why I love this work, because not only is it something that I do professionally, but, I got my skin in the game because I'm a daughter of aging parents. And I want them to stay around a lot longer than they are ready for. But, one of the gifts that I gave my sisters and I gave my parents, my mother in particular, was an iPad also before COVID hit. And boy, that was a big game changer. And showing my parents about Facebook and them messaging, and then be able to, because I was born in the Philippines, we have so many different relatives in the Philippines, them messaging people in the Philippines without having to pay long distance phone. And for a long time, I had to keep telling them, nope, you don't have to pay long distance fee for video chatting with relatives across the world. And it was such a gift. It was such a gift. And then to be able to look at different pictures of relatives and connect that way, definitely a game changer. And it would be a great way to provide this type of service to other people.
The other thing that my mother uses is she does use a couple of the computer games, and that's a very good exercise. Excuse me, as well.
Yeah,
they're pretty easy to to get through the apps, and once they're set up, people can use those pretty easily, and they keep people engaged and keeps their mind working as well if they're the right games.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's even YouTube. My mom loves YouTube. She loves to learn new things, new recipes. So she's always trying to perfect that perfect loaf of bread, which we are so grateful for. But it's great for people who are private, who are avid learners, who want to connect with people. Maybe they may be shy, but it's just a great way to connect. As you mentioned, social connection is just so important, and that is actually one of the keys to longevity and health and happy lives, right? Yeah,
absolutely, definitely.
I mean, it's just so important. So I have other questions to ask. So as far as your work with the senior centers, I know you're very available, and you're just so, they're so easy to connect with and ask questions. What type of questions have people, because of COVID, what type of questions are people coming up to you asking for?
Oh, I will tell you that office hours have been really interesting in the last couple of months. We have been doing them remotely, and we are back doing them live. And so we kind of do them in a series of rounds. We will do a round of where we go to the senior centers. Then we'll do a round to the district where we do them at town halls, libraries, evenings. And then we'll do a third round. Sometimes in the past, we've done them at coffee shops. So we try to reach people as many ways as possible. But the issues that come up are varied. Just as, office hours in the last couple of weeks, we've had people come in relative to Social Security. And even though in the state level, we don't deal with Social Security, we're able to connect them to the appropriate resources. People have come in relative to housing and housing assistance. They come in with maybe a state tax issue. They come in sometimes with questions about where they can get food and what food programs they may qualify for. And so it really runs the range. And in the past 2 weeks, there's been an awful lot of discussion about vaccines, COVID vaccines. And I would say that in the last couple of weeks, the nature of the office hours has gotten probably more political than it has been in the past. In the past, it has been generally people coming in with constituent issues that we may want to address. Even sometimes it's a tree or sidewalk, and we deal with the city. Those type of issues. And in the last couple of weeks, there's been more discussion among people coming in about vaccines and the politics of the day, which has been really, really a significant change in what we've seen in office hours.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, with the booster vaccine being the forefront of the news, even as a healthcare professional, it's just one of those things that we constantly get emails telling us what the new guidelines are. So it's just very, it's just the times we're living in. It's hard. It's every day there's something that we have to adjust to and be flexible and just be in the know. As far as food assistance, what type of resources are there for the aging population, especially around this time? Because sometimes, and I read somewhere that maybe, people are getting Meals on Wheels, which is great. And the deliverers, the people who deliver, are very integral to make sure that the people that they're serving are safe and that they're okay and they're doing fine. So they're actually serving a dual role.
Yeah, it's food delivery and almost a wellness check.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really has been that. And the people who do that are just great, the volunteers who do that. So Meals on Wheels is a resource that's available. And as you say, it serves a dual purpose, and it's very, very valuable for people to have not only the food, but the wellness check. But depending on the circumstances of an individual, they can certainly call our office. There are a host of programs that are available out there that provide access to food. There's SNAP programs. There's programs through senior centers beyond Meals on Wheels. A lot of the senior centers offer meals at their location now. They're doing that again. But many of the senior centers that during COVID provided kind of drive-by or pickup for meals or delivery, they're continuing to do that. And so seniors should check with that as well. Again, many of the senior centers are still doing that, where you can drive by literally and pick up a meal without getting out of your car, or you can make arrangements for a meal to be delivered separate from Meals on Wheels. So there's a lot of resources out there. And if anybody has a need or a question relative to access to food, please call our office at 617-722-1494. And then once we get a sense of the circumstances, we can move the person in the right direction and assist them with getting access to food.
And has there been a need to have more food donations in those systems so that they could provide more food to the people who need it?
Yes, and a lot of communities early on were doing food drives to fund the local food pantries. They're not doing as many food drives because the shortages of food that were evident and that were of concern, the threat of or the fear of shortages of food that were of concern early on in the pandemic, those seem to be resolved. But there is still the need. We're finding it that seniors, in some respects, during COVID, were able to access food better than others because there was an infrastructure in place, whether it was Meals on Wheels or food programs through senior centers and some volunteer drives. What we found was that for other people, that infrastructure, while it was there, wasn't known. A lot of people would call our office at first with an issue relative to unemployment and completing an application for unemployment benefits. Then we may have heard from them a couple of weeks later when they hadn't yet received any sort of unemployment benefit, asking about access to food. And these were people who have never utilized the services previously, so they weren't aware of the infrastructure. And that prompted an enormous need at our food pantries and at the food bank as well. And that is still something that they're dealing with. The numbers have gotten better, but nonetheless, there's still a lot of people out there with food access and food insecurity as issues for them on a daily basis.
Very interesting. What type of, so the winter is coming. I don't want to rush time, but winter is coming soon. I love to walk and I love to see other people out there walking. What are some fall prevention type initiatives or recommendations at the state level that's being done in anticipation of the Delta and the COVID and the cold winter months coming? What's out there that we could kind of tap on or learn about?
We're trying to do a better job of making people aware of and give access to our state parks and reservations. They are really beautiful spots, and they're scattered about. And in most parts of the Commonwealth, there's something pretty close by. We here have the Blue Hills, and there are walking trails of various types in the Blue Hills. Some are very flat and maybe not paved, very safe in terms of avoiding falls. Others are a little bit more challenging. World's End, the Trustee Reservation down in Hingham, is a beautiful spot to go walking. Along Wollaston Beach, DCR property is a beautiful spot. And then that leads to another issue for areas such as Wollaston Beach locally, or Nantasket Beach, or Revere Beach, the DCR beaches, Carson Beach and L Street Beach in Boston and in South Boston. The thing that we can do as a Commonwealth, and we need to do it better, is to make sure that those walkways are evenly paved, that they're well paved and evenly paved, and that there are not cracks and there are not lifts or bumps in those walkways. Because I tell you, I like to walk, and one of the places I like to go walking is in Boston. And sometimes I'll be in the Back Bay, for instance, where there are brick sidewalks. Those are really, really dangerous. And I kind of move along as I'm walking, and at least once or twice every night when I'm walking, I will hit a brick or something that's raised. So having a smooth pavement is really, really important, whether it's at Wollaston Beach, any one of the other beaches, or even in our downtown areas where people like to walk. And so we try to give as much funding to communities to do those types of things. We call them complete street part of it is one of the programs is a complete street program where you not only address things that are underground, but you also address the paving. We try to do a job of connecting our commuting hubs to the downtown areas with better walkways, safer walkways that are smooth and segregated from the traffic that may be going by. So we try to do all of those types of things. And it's so important, you touched on it, for people to get out and to walk. Last night I went for a walk over in South Boston, not along the beach, but through the neighborhoods. And most of the sidewalks are in pretty good shape, but there's some sidewalks that if I was using a walker or a cane or was just walking as I was, they can be dangerous. And so a role of government should be making sure that we have the funding in place to make our sidewalks as user-friendly as possible, as safe as possible.
Definitely, because there's some sidewalks that may not be lined with bricks, but they are uneven because of old trees with the root system just kind of outgrowing and growing through the concrete or the pavements. Very dangerous, very dangerous. As far as the Complete Street program, is there any type of education out there? Because, again, we want to encourage people to be active and to just get out and get some fresh air and some sun. I'm noticing that there's a lot of different types of signs or light system in the streets and for pedestrians. Has there been much education out there as far as what these mean? I'm thinking about a particular near Tufts Medical Center. There's the Herald and also the Washington Street.
Yes.
And I would park far away. And it's kind of confusing because there's a green light for the traffic to either go straight or take a right. But at the same time of that green light, there's also the pedestrian crossing. So there's the pedestrian can cross, but there's also a green light that can turn into the pedestrian, which again, injury prevention, it's hit that type of light system has caused some fatal accidents.
Yes, those are primarily when you're walking and you've got the white pedestrian light. Oftentimes it's a left that's coming on a green. They've got a green to go straight, or they can take a left, and they don't realize that you have the walk signal, and so you're halfway out into the intersection, and all of a sudden the vehicle is taking a left. And if there's any other vehicle there that's blocking any sort of view, it becomes very dangerous. For instance, you mentioned where Tufts is throughout the South End. There are many areas like that. And then the Back Bay, there have been a couple tragic accidents there as a result of that type of signaling. So education on signals, what signals mean, is really important. And for instance, in Quincy Center, when they first went in, we got a lot of calls about the lights that are right by President's Place and right by the Hancock Adams Common. They're a new style of lights. They have a double red, a flashing double red, and they are confusing for people because they're not widely used. I think people who are regularly in Quincy Center know what they now mean, but I do think that education on new signalization, on existing signalization, is important. And I think a lot of that has to occur at the local level, getting out to people where they can, or through a meeting like this, whether there's a special show with the traffic and parking folks in the city of Quincy kind of going through and explaining the different lights. But yes, it is an issue. As a walker, sometimes you see that white pedestrian thing and you move and you don't realize there's somebody coming from your right, that person who's then taking a left onto the street. It can be quite dangerous. Yeah. And then sometimes the amount of time that you have to cross is not all that great. And some areas it's might be 30 seconds, other areas it's 15. And for some, it gets down to 0 and then immediately turns. There's no buffer between when it hits, 0 and when it turns. And so that's always a risk as well.
Yeah. I was at a business conference out in Portland, Oregon many years ago, and a friend of mine was driving, and I was so impressed at how they allowed pedestrians, this is the people in the car and traffic, they allowed the pedestrians to take their time to cross, and they waited to proceed ahead. They waited until the pedestrians' both feet were on the sidewalk, the destination, before they went ahead. And I don't see that much in our area because we tend to kind of drive around pedestrians, don't we?
When we go up to vacation in Maine, and people actually stop for people who are in a crosswalk. In Massachusetts, I think there's always a calculation done by the driver. Okay, they're only 3 feet into the crosswalk to my left, so I can keep going through. Yeah. In Maine, they actually stop. Once you step off the curb, they stop. And it is interesting when you go other places compared to Boston. I was out in Vancouver a while ago, and nobody crosses the street other than at an intersection, and nobody crosses the street until they have the light. And the lights are very well timed. And I remember when I first was up there walking, I'd see the light and I'd say, "Oh, I've got to get up there quickly so I can cross." And then I realized that if I just kept at my pace, they're timed well enough that you're not standing on a street corner for minutes waiting for the light to turn. And the drivers are very respectful of those lights. And so while in Boston, you kind of step off the curb and cut across traffic if it's stopped, even though you may not be in a crosswalk, and people go around cars. Sometimes people go over cars to send messages. You have all of this happening, but in a lot of other cities, the drivers follow the rules and the pedestrians follow the rules, and it really works well. And Boston is, I think, unique in that it doesn't work all that well. Boston drivers are somewhat notorious, and I think it's a reputation that's pretty well earned, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's a lot of different studies out there on distracted driving, and to add to that, distracted pedestrians. So, the focus is so different for both the driver and the pedestrian. But just going back to the aging population and different types of supports out there that can be offered, especially during these uncertain times. What other supports comes to mind as far as how we can really support the mature adults and how to navigate during these times, how to come out even stronger? I know I guess personally, it's one thing to say, let's support them so that they can get through these times. But for me, I want to go a little bit further and just how can we make them stronger? How can we motivate them so that way they can really bounce back stronger?
I think a lot of it comes down to advocacy. We have a state budget. We have a set amount of revenues each year that fund the state budget. And then there's a tension between all the different groups as to how we allocate our funding. And seniors are a priority every year. And a lot of that funding, as we've talked about, goes through our healthcare delivery system and then also through senior centers and things like that. But for other things, advocating is really effective. People may think, oh, if I call my state rep or my senator's office or my city council's office or the mayor's office, will have no impact. I can tell you that it does. And so if seniors have a concern, reach out because we hear it, we'll read it, and it's really important. Otherwise, we may not know that the need is out there. And so I always tell people, do not be afraid to send an email, to pick up the phone, to go to an office hour, whatever way of advocacy works best for an individual, to do it. And if it's just to say, hey, I love my local senior center and I'd like more funding, that's important for us to hear. If it's I like to get out my neighborhood and walk, but the sidewalks are not really in good shape, that's important for us to hear. If it's I don't have transportation to get to my physician, to my doctor's office, that's really important for us to hear so that we can make sure that we then respond with appropriate programming. And there are a lot of volunteer groups out there that do incredible work for seniors, and they end up being really strong advocates as well. For instance, we a couple times a year go to programs that are put on by South Shore Elder Services, and they bring in Manor Community Health, they bring in QCAP, they bring in all the organizations that provide services to seniors, and each one of them presents to us what they've experienced over the last several months and highlight the need for program changes, additional funding, whatever it may be. And so in addition to contacting us, if you are receiving services from a local service agency and you've got a concern, let them know or ask them, and what are you working on with the legislature? Is there a way that I can help? And they may say, yes, if you could write a letter, that would be enormously impactful. If you need fuel, if you've relied on fuel assistance and you're worried about whether there'll be enough fuel assistance in the upcoming winter, you write a letter, reach out to your senator, your state rep, because we fund that program as well through QCAP locally. So just advocating as much as possible is the best way to make us aware of the needs. And the needs do change periodically. So it's very important that we hear about those needs.
I wonder if there's such a thing as a campaign to teach older adults how to become advocates for themselves. So, just the advocacy 101. So that way there is a mindset can change from being a complainer to maybe somebody who is, stating the need, knowing who to call without bothering them, empowering them with the knowledge that every voice counts instead of that voice being a squeaky wheel. Because I can speak for my parents, I think I can, but they don't want to bother people. They just, they have needs, and sometimes I have to kind of read in between the lines. But providing a process or a system in place, maybe education, we've talked about, how it's important to educate, but just simple advocacy education so that we're giving them the skills and maybe the wordings to help them be able to feel like their words are heard, and that their words not only are heard, but it's making a difference for themselves and other people.
I think you make a great point between complaining and advocating. That's a really great distinction. We have people call all the time and complain, and oftentimes we'll say, well, what would you like us to do? And sometimes you get a response, well, I don't care what you do, I just want to let you know what's happening. Or they'll say, I don't know, that's what you get paid for. So you get a lot of different responses. But the best calls are when somebody calls and says, hey, people that I know are experiencing this, or I'm experiencing this, and here's an idea. And I now have on my list computers for seniors and advocacy training for seniors. Great ideas. And I'm not aware of any advocacy training. And we do it in the schools. I do it in the schools. And I do it whenever I go out to a community group, or when an advocacy group comes to the State House when we're open. But for instance, every year I meet with medical students, and they ask, as they are going to proceed through their careers, what can they do to have an impact on public policy? And it's the same response. Get involved beyond your profession, beyond your day-to-day work of your profession. Get involved, but reach out and get to know your representatives, your senators, your members of city council, your U.S. senators and members of Congress, and build a bit of a relationship. Whether it's on a phone call or whether it's during office hours, a coffee hour at a home or a senior center, building that relationship so that your voice is heard. This business that I'm in is the people business. And the more relationships you're able to establish, the more relationships you're able to then build upon, it generally results in better outcomes in terms of policy. And our business is somewhat, unfortunately, a reactionary business. We hear about something and then we react. If people can be a bit more proactive, ourselves included, it makes things better. And so hearing people just put out ideas is very helpful. And we sometimes get those. I had office hours one time at Thomas Crane Library, and a senior came in, a gentleman who was a veteran, and he said, the municipalities, Quincy included, package all their tax liens for people who haven't been able to pay their taxes and have a lien on their home. They package those, the city does, and sells them to a collector. And that collector pays a certain price for the whole package and then goes out and collects whatever they can. And this gentleman said, I don't think that the liens that are put on veterans' homes, or particularly or active service members' homes, should be put out to a private collector. I think they should be able to deal with the city directly. And that person came in office hours and conveyed that. And my reaction was, I never thought of that. That's a good point. And he wasn't complaining. He was just highlighting an issue. Well, within a month, we happened to have a veterans bill going through the legislature, and I was able to offer an amendment to it and put that into the bill. And that is now law, that the municipalities cannot sell the liens of active duty or veterans, that they have to deal with those at the local level where they know the people, personally. And so it wasn't a complaint. It was an idea, and it's now law. And so hearing those types of things is really important. I never would have thought of that. And yet he raised it, and literally within a couple of months, it was law. So sometimes it works.
Wow, that's perfect timing. That's wonderful. I'd love to hear that. Oh, wow. As far as what are your ideas about creating more of an age-friendly type environment or communities in the districts that you are that you serve?
Well, I think a lot of it you kind of work within your lane. In my lane presently at the State House, I continue to work on behavioral health issues, but the new responsibility has to do with housing and transportation to some degree. So I think it's really important within our communities to have housing that is community oriented, community based. Oftentimes we look at housing and for seniors as, okay, we need senior housing. And in the past, sometimes it's been put on a fringe of a neighborhood, or it's put out in somewhere where it doesn't work. We do have some pretty good locations in Quincy because we're a city where people actually are kind of in our little downtown areas. But in a lot of other communities, because land in the core is so expensive, they built seniors housing out around the peripheral, around the edge. And it can be somewhat isolating and difficult for people to get to different places. So having housing for seniors that's within the heart of our community, near a library, near a food store, near local services, near public transportation, that to me is the best way to build community. And there's a resistance in many communities because sometimes that housing is built by nonprofits, or it might be public housing and it comes off the tax rolls. And so local governments are really hesitant to have that happen because they lose the tax money. But, I'm willing to say that losing a little bit of tax money and better engaging people within our community, people of all ages, particularly seniors, is just so much more important. So as we start to focus a little bit more on senior housing, I think the sense of community is making sure that housing is right in the middle of our community and not at the edge. And then within the housing that we build, we have this thing where oftentimes we build just senior housing. And I think we should look at, do we have a building where there's a senior component, where if there's 100 units, maybe 30 of them are designated for seniors, because I think there's some value of that engagement between different age groups. And we sometimes, again, put seniors in senior housing and put them on the edge of the downtown. Wouldn't it be great to have seniors in senior housing right in the middle of our communities, and then also seniors in kind of a mixed place where there are people of all ages? I know my mother, less so now, but at with the apartment where she lived up until just about a year and a half ago now, there were a lot of young families. And she loved it. She had 7 children, so she loved children. And she would love hearing the children play in the hallway, or she would love looking out the window and seeing the children riding their bikes outside. She just, that was great for her. And so I think we've got to look at doing more of that.
Yeah. I would love to offer that, to have those type of buildings be built near schools.
Yes.
Because so that there is this beautiful give and take that the young children can maybe connect, like maybe a pen pal program or a buddy system or a mentoring program, so that the people who live near the school can have a connection, and then people in the school system, the students, can have that mentor or foster grandparent.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
there's so many children who don't have that. and there's so many seniors who don't have it either. So it's a natural connection.
Yeah, natural connection. And it's a great way for the seniors to also learn about the computer system and how the children can learn about history and just different types of occupation that these seniors have. So we're almost, this hour almost it flew by. Thank you for your time. I want to see if there's anybody on the call right now, if they have any questions. Okay, so there's a question about the COVID resiliency, aging. So do you have any, I think we've kind of touched upon that, but is there anything else that you might want to add regarding the aging population and any type of COVID resiliency type programs that we need to know about?
No, I think we've covered it. And I think what's been shown is that we just have a lot of work to do in that respect. And I guess the greatest resiliency we can have is just to continue and encourage people to get vaccinated. Seniors have led the way on that. And so that has been really grateful. Some of the worst tragedy of COVID was what's happened in some of our congregate care facilities, our nursing facilities. It was just such a tragedy. And so we've got to do a better job at those things. And that is one of the areas that we're working on, for instance, out the Holyoke Soldiers Home, which was just terrible as it was in other places. You know, they're looking at better ways to build facilities for people. And so I think that's very important. We had South Cove in Quincy that handled the pandemic and COVID very well. And part of it was, one, they committed staff and leadership down there. And two, they also have a new facility that was designed that I think lessened the likelihood of there being a major spread in the facility. And so we have to look at those design elements as well as a way for, kind of resiliency for people, our seniors who live in those type of facilities. But I think just more outreach, more engagement, all those types of things allow for not only a better physical being, but a better mental health being. And that is just so important.
Mm-hmm. There's so much more questions I want to ask you, but I want to leave with asking you one more question. Where do you see yourself, hopefully 40 years from now, or 50 years from now?
At least 50.
50, at least 50. Where do you see yourself? What kind of an older adult do you see yourself?
I'd like to see myself as engaged. People always say, what are you going to do in retirement? And while I may officially retire, meaning, you get a pension or whatever, hopefully, I hope to never retire. One of the things I'd like to do is to teach, to be in an academic setting, either in public schools, a private school for K through 12, or in college or graduate school level. I would very much like to teach. I very much like to travel and volunteer through travel. I've been over to Moria refugee camp in Greece twice. It's described as the worst refugee camp in the world, but in a very strange place. It was one of the most uplifting, very strange way, one of the most uplifting experiences I've had going over to the camp those two times. So I'd like to continue to do those types of things. And my wife, Gina, and I talk about that all the time is, how do we stay active and engaged and make a difference in people's lives? And as long as we're healthy, that's what we both want to do. And so I'm excited about it. There's different chapters. We're kind of approaching the empty nest chapter now. But it's exciting to think about all the different things that we can do later. So much of it comes down to, though, whether you have the health and the good health to do it. And so that's a primary focus: preventing falls, exercising our minds, staying engaged. If we don't do those things, then I won't be able to do the things I want to do through my 80s and my 90s. And if I can just share a quick story, I was a director of a public pension system, and I remember specifically two individuals that came in at about the same time to retire. One was a woman, and she said, I'm so excited. I've got so many things I want to do. I can't wait to retire. And a gentleman came in, and I said, what are you going to do in retirement? He goes, I'm going to sit on my couch with my clicker. That's it. I've done my work. They came back several months later, literally on the same day, because they had to drop off forms. She came in holding hands with her husband. She looked about 20 years younger. They were out. They were just going to drop off the form and then go to a movie. And she was so excited. And he came in and he looked, unfortunately, like he had aged 20 years because he went from a pretty active lifestyle at work to a very sedentary lifestyle. and he looked like he had aged. And that really hit me, that you have to stay active, you have to stay engaged. It's just, you end up with a much better quality of life.
Definitely.
And you're able to help others.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for those. That's very telling. Thank you so much. I want to thank you so much, State Senator John Keenan, for staying with us here for the whole hour.
No, thank you.
I learned so much from you. And if you need help getting those new ideas in
training for
place,
seniors and computers for seniors.
count me in.
All right.
All right. So I want to thank everybody. Thank you, Quincy Public Library, for allowing me to continue doing my outreach work to serve the aging population. So until next time, thank you, everybody. Thank you again, State Senator John Keenan.
Thank you. It's great to see you.